The brochure was glossy, the paper thick and cool beneath my fingertips. On the cover, a smiling, silver-haired couple strolled through a garden so perfect it looked unreal. "Sunny Meadows Senior Living," the text read in a gentle, looping script. "A community of care." My son Michael slid it across the kitchen table, his movements practiced and smooth, like a salesman closing a deal he was sure he'd already won. His wife, Sarah, sat beside him, her expression a careful blend of sympathy and resolve. It was a look I'd seen her practice in the mirror, the one she used for difficult parent-teacher conferences or returning a purchase without a receipt. "We've been doing a lot of thinking, Mom," Michael began, his voice wrapped in that soft, placating tone he used when he was about to ask for something he knew he had no right to. "And we're worried about you. Here, all alone in this big house." I didn't say anything. I just looked at my hands, clasped around a teacup that had gone cold. The house wasn't that big, and I wasn't alone. They were here, living in the 2 upstairs bedrooms, their children's muddy shoes perpetually cluttering the entryway. "It has a wonderful activities program," Sarah chimed in, tapping a manicured finger on a picture of a water aerobics class. "Bridge club, gardening, movie nights. You'd make so many friends. It would be a real community." I had a community. I had my garden club, my Thursday morning book group at the library, my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who brought me her extra tomatoes every summer. But they didn't see that. They saw a problem to be managed, a loose end to be tied up. "And it would be so much safer," Michael continued, leaning forward, his face earnest. "No more stairs to worry about, 24-hour nursing staff on call. We wouldn't have to worry every time the phone rings." They worried. That was a new one. They hadn't worried 3 weeks ago when I had the flu and they were in Aspen, their cheerful texts about the ski conditions a stark contrast to the quiet ache in my bones. They hadn't worried last winter when the furnace broke and I spent 2 nights sleeping in my winter coat until a repairman could come, a bill I paid for from my own savings without ever mentioning it. The truth, the real, unspoken reason for this sudden, suffocating concern came a moment later. Sarah glanced around the kitchen, her eyes lingering on the dated oak cabinets and the linoleum floor I'd chosen with my husband, Arthur, 30 years ago. "And honestly, Mom, it would be a relief for us, too. We could finally update this place, put in a proper island, maybe knock out that wall into the dining room, really make this house our own." There it was, the quiet, ugly truth laid bare on my kitchen table, right next to the brochure for Sunny Meadows. I wasn't a person to be cared for. I was an obstacle to a kitchen renovation. I was a life lease standing between them and the open concept living space they'd seen on some home improvement show. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I had spent a lifetime learning that my arguments were seen as stubbornness, my feelings as overreactions. So I did what I had always done. I made myself smaller. I nodded slowly, my gaze still fixed on my teacup. "It looks, very nice," I said, my voice a quiet, neutral thing. Relief washed over their faces, so visible it was almost comical. They had expected a fight, tears, a scene. They had prepared for it. But my quiet acquiescence disarmed them. They saw it as surrender. "We knew you'd understand, Mom," Michael said, patting my hand. His touch was brief, impersonal. "It's for the best, for everyone." They left soon after, chattering about paint swatches and contractor estimates, the sound of their future echoing in the house I had built. I remained at the table long after they had gone upstairs. The brochure for Sunny Meadows lay on the table like a verdict. I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed years ago, replaced by a quiet, deep-seated ache that had become a permanent part of me. I looked around the kitchen at the worn spot on the floor by the sink where Arthur and I used to dance to the radio while doing dishes. I saw the faint pencil marks on the door frame, charting Michael's height from a small boy into a man who now saw his mother as a piece of furniture to be moved out of the way. They thought I was a relic, a fragile old woman to be managed, housed, and eventually forgotten. They had forgotten one crucial detail. They had forgotten who owned the house. I stood up, rinsed my cold teacup in the sink, and walked into my husband's old study. The room was mostly untouched, a sanctuary of books and memories. I went to the large oak filing cabinet in the corner, a place they never looked, and pulled out the key I wore on a chain around my neck, tucked beneath my sweater. I opened the bottom drawer, the one marked personal, and removed a heavy, leather-bound portfolio. Inside, nestled in crisp plastic sleeves, were the documents they had never bothered to ask about. The original deed to the house, free and clear, in my name and Arthur's. The legal papers establishing the Eleanor Vance Living Trust after Arthur's death, making me the sole trustee, and the rental agreement, a simple one-page document I had drawn up with my lawyer 5 years ago when Michael and Sarah had moved in for a few months after his business failed. It outlined their status as tenants, paying a nominal rent that I had for 5 years told them not to worry about, accepting their presence as payment enough. They had signed it without reading it, eager to accept the lifeline I had offered. They had forgotten they were tenants. They had started to believe they were heirs, waiting for an inheritance I was taking too long to provide. I sat down in Arthur's old leather chair. The document spread across the desk. The silence of the house was different now. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. They wanted a community of care. They wanted a house they could make their own. I would give them exactly what they deserved, the opportunity to find one somewhere else. The decision settled in me, not with a crash, but with a quiet, profound click, like a lock finally finding its key. I spent the next morning in the garden. The roses needed pruning, their thorny branches reaching out like desperate hands. I worked slowly, methodically. The snip of the shears a satisfying final sound. Each cut felt like severing a tie, trimming away the dead growth that had been choking the life out of me for years. Michael and Sarah left early, off to what they called a weekend getaway. A trip I knew was actually a meeting with a financial planner to discuss the logistics of selling my assets once I was safely tucked away in Sunny Meadows. Their absence left the house blessedly quiet. It felt like my own again. I thought about the years I had poured into this home, into this family. I remembered Michael's college tuition, paid for with the inheritance my own mother had left me. I remembered the down payment on their first car, a loan that was never repaid. I remembered the countless hours of childcare for their children, Chloe and Ben, so Sarah could build her career. I had given and given quietly, without expectation, believing that was what a mother did. I had mistaken their acceptance for appreciation. I had believed their dependence was a form of love. The truth was, I had made myself so useful that I had become invisible, a part of the house's infrastructure, like the plumbing or the electricity, only noticed when it failed to work. After I finished with the roses, I came inside and made a pot of tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where they had presented me with my future, and I began to plan mine. I pulled out a fresh sheet of paper from the drawer and wrote a name at the top. Ms. Albright, my lawyer. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had handled Arthur's estate with a quiet competence that I had deeply appreciated. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but I knew she would remember me. I dialed her number. Her assistant answered, and a few minutes later, Miss Albright's crisp voice was on the line. "Eleanor," she said, a note of pleasant surprise in her tone. "It's been a long time. I hope everything is well." "Everything is about to be," I replied. "I need to make some changes to my will, my power of attorney, and a few other domestic matters." "Of course," she said without a hint of curiosity. "When would you like to come in?" We scheduled an appointment for Monday. After I hung up, I felt a wave of something that felt dangerously like freedom. It was a foreign feeling, and I wasn't sure I trusted it yet. I spent the rest of the day in a state of quiet, focused activity. I went through the closets, sorting clothes I hadn't worn in a decade. I polished the silver teapot that had belonged to my grandmother. I wasn't just cleaning, I was reclaiming. Each object I touched, I asked the silent question, is this mine? Or is this a memory of them? The distinction was becoming clearer with every passing hour. My granddaughter Chloe called that afternoon. She was 17, a whirlwind of artistic talent and teenage angst, and the only one in the family who seemed to see me as a person rather than a function. "Grandma, just checking in. Mom and Dad are out of town. Are you okay over there?" "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart," I said, and for the first time in a long time, it was the absolute truth. "I'm just doing a bit of organizing." "Okay," she said, though I could hear the skepticism in her voice. She knew me too well. "Well, I'm coming over for dinner tomorrow night. I'll bring pizza. Don't try to cook." I smiled. "I wouldn't dream of it." That evening, I sat in the study again, the leather portfolio open on the desk. I reread the rental agreement. The terms were simple: month-to-month tenancy, 90 days notice required for termination by either party. It was all there, in black and white, signed by Michael Vance and Sarah Vance. They had been so eager to move in, so relieved to have their financial problems solved, that they had signed away their perceived rights without a second glance. I pulled out another document, my current will. It was simple. Everything, the house, the savings, the investments, was to be split evenly between Michael and his sister, who lived in Oregon and called twice a year. Michael was listed as the executor. I took a red pen from the desk drawer and drew a single clean line through his name. Not out of anger, but out of a stark, newfound clarity. He could not be trusted to execute my wishes when he was so busy planning for my obsolescence. Monday morning, I dressed with care. I chose a navy blue dress I hadn't worn in years, a string of my mother's pearls, and a pair of sensible heels. I was not going into this meeting as a victim. I was going as the trustee of my own life. Ms. Albright's office was on the top floor of a downtown building, with a view of the city that made everything look small and manageable. She greeted me with a firm handshake and led me into a conference room with a long, polished table. "So, Eleanor," she said once we were seated, "tell me what's on your mind." I laid it all out, calmly, factually. The conversation about Sunny Meadows, the rental agreement, The will. I didn't editorialize. I didn't cry. I simply presented the facts as they were. Miss Albright listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she was silent for a long moment. "I see," she said finally. "And what would you like to do?" "First," I said, sliding the will across the table, "I want to change this. I want to remove Michael as executor. I want to change the distribution of assets." "To whom?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "But not to him. Perhaps to Chloe, or to a charity. For now, I just want him removed." "That's easily done," she said, making a note. "And the power of attorney?" "Revoked. Immediately." "Understood. And the domestic matter?" she asked, a slight knowing smile touching her lips. "I want to serve them with a 90-day notice to quit," I said. "Site in owner occupancy. I want my house back." For the first time, Ms. Albright looked genuinely impressed. "Eleanor," she said, "I have to advise you. This will likely cause significant family discord." "I'm aware," I said, "but the discord has been there for years. I've just been the only one expected to absorb it." She nodded, a look of respect in her eyes. "Very well. We can have the notice drawn up and served by a process server this week. It will be official, indisputable." We spent the next hour going through the necessary paperwork. With each signature, I felt a weight lifting, a sense of rightness settling deep in my bones. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I was the one holding the pen. When I left her office, the city below seemed brighter, the air crisper. I didn't go straight home. I went to a small nursery a few blocks away and bought a new plant, a vibrant green orchid with a single defiant bloom. It was time to start bringing new life into my house. As I walked in the front door, my orchid in my arms, I saw it. An envelope slipped under the door. It was from the financial planner. Michael and Sarah must have had it delivered. It was addressed to them, but my name was on the first line of the enclosed letter, a generic form letter about estate transition strategies. They hadn't even waited for me to agree. They were already planning my financial demise. I placed the letter in the shredder, piece by piece, and put my new orchid in the sunniest spot on the kitchen counter. I watered it carefully, a small, hopeful smile on my face. The house was quiet, but for the first time in a very long time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like mine. Chloe arrived the next evening with 2 large pizzas and a bag of salad, just as promised. She breezed into the kitchen, her youthful energy a welcome contrast to the heavy silence that had filled the house for the past few days. "Okay, Grandma, I got pepperoni and veggie," she announced, dropping the boxes on the counter. "And I brought that weird ginger dressing you like." She paused, looking around the kitchen. "Did you move the coffee pot?" "I did," I said, pulling plates from the cabinet. "I decided I liked it better on the other side." It was a small thing, but it was a start. She gave me a long, searching look. "Are you sure you're okay? You seem different." "Different how?" "I don't know," she said, shrugging. "Lighter, maybe. And your orchid is new." We ate at the kitchen table, talking easily about her classes, her friends, her latest art project. She was a talented painter, with a passion that reminded me so much of Arthur. Unlike her parents, Chloe never seemed to want anything from me other than my time. She listened when I spoke, asked real questions, and didn't fiddle with her phone while I was talking. After dinner, we sat in the living room, a comfortable silence settling between us. "Mom and Dad are being weird," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "They keep having these hushed conversations and shutting the door when I walk by. They're planning something." "I know," I said softly. She looked at me, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What is it? Are you selling the house?" "No, sweetheart, I'm not selling the house." I hesitated, then decided Chloe deserved the truth. "They want me to move into a senior living facility," I told her. Her face fell. "What? Why?" "You're fine. You're healthier than they are. They believe it would be safer for me," I said, choosing my words carefully, "and more convenient for them." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by a flash of anger. "That's not fair. This is your house." "Yes, it is," I said. And in that moment, I knew I had an ally. I didn't tell her about my plan, about the eviction notice. It wasn't her burden to carry. But knowing she was on my side, that she saw the injustice of it all, strengthened my resolve. The process server delivered the notice on Wednesday afternoon. I was in the garden when he arrived, a nondescript man in a beige jacket. He handed me a copy for my records. "They'll be served at their workplaces this afternoon," he said, his tone professional and detached. "They'll each have to sign for it." I thanked him and went back to my weeding. There was no sense of triumph, no vindictive pleasure, just a quiet, somber feeling of a necessary thing finally being done. I was home when they arrived that evening separately. Sarah came first, her face a storm cloud of fury. She slammed her briefcase on the entryway table and marched into the living room where I was reading. She held up the legal document, her hand shaking with rage. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "I believe it's self-explanatory," I said calmly, not looking up from my book. "It's a 90-day notice to quit the premises." "You can't be serious," she sputtered. "You're kicking us out? Your own family?" "You are tenants in my house," I reminded her gently, "and the owner has decided she requires the property for her own use." Her jaw dropped. "Tenants? We are not tenants. We take care of you." "Do you?" I finally closed my book and looked at her. "Do you take care of me, Sarah? Or do you simply live in my house, eat my food, and plan my future without my consent?" She was speechless, her anger momentarily replaced by stunned disbelief. Before she could recover, Michael walked in. He held an identical envelope in his hand, his face pale with shock. "Mom, what is this? This has to be a mistake." "It's no mistake, Michael," I said, my voice even. "I am reclaiming my home." "But where are we supposed to go?" he stammered, the reality of the situation beginning to sink in. "We can't afford a place like this on our own." "That is a problem you will have 90 days to solve," I said. I stood up, the book still in my hand. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I am going to my room. I suggest you both take some time to read the document carefully. It was drafted by my lawyer." I walked past them, my back straight, and went upstairs to the bedroom I had shared with Arthur for 40 years. I closed the door, and for the first time since they had moved in, I turned the lock. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of their raised, frantic voices from downstairs. But for once, their chaos was not my problem. I sat on my bed, the quiet of the room a welcome embrace, and I felt a profound sense of peace. The war had begun, but I had already won the most important battle. I had taken back myself. The 90 days that followed were a masterclass in cold warfare. The house, once a place of at least feigned civility, became a landscape of icy silences and passive-aggressive maneuvers. Sarah took to slamming kitchen cabinets and leaving pointedly placed brochures for grief counseling on the hallway table. Michael alternated between sullen avoidance and desperate wheedling attempts at reconciliation. "Mom, we can talk about this," he'd say, catching me in the hallway. "There's no need to involve lawyers. We're family." "Family doesn't try to put their mother in a home so they can renovate her kitchen," I would reply calmly and continue on my way. They began to see me not as a frail old woman, but as an adversary, and it was a role I found I was surprisingly well suited for. They underestimated me. They always had. They thought my quietness was weakness, my generosity a given. They never imagined I had a spine of steel forged over a lifetime of quiet endurance. While they stewed in their resentment, I continued my work of disentanglement. I met with Ms. Albright again and finalized the changes to my will. I created a trust for Chloe, designating a significant portion of my estate for her education and future, with a trusted bank officer as the trustee, not a family member. I updated my medical directives, ensuring that in the event of my incapacitation, my wishes would be followed, not theirs. Each document signed was another brick in the fortress I was building around myself. Chloe became my lifeline. She visited twice a week, bringing groceries and gossip, her bright presence a stark contrast to the gloom that otherwise permeated the house. We never spoke of the eviction directly in front of her parents, but she knew. She would give me small conspiratorial winks when she thought no one was looking, or squeeze my hand in a gesture of silent support. One evening, she found me in the study, going over old financial records. "What are you looking for, Grandma?" she asked, peering over my shoulder. "Just patterns," I said. The records told a story of one-sided giving, a financial history that mirrored the emotional one. I had paid for their vacations, their car repairs, their children's expensive summer camps. The flow of resources was a one-way street, from my carefully managed savings to their chaotic, impulsive spending. It wasn't a loan. It was a subsidy they had come to see as their right. As the eviction deadline loomed closer, their tactics grew more desperate. One afternoon, Sarah approached me with tears in her eyes, a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I don't know what we did to make you hate us so much, Eleanor," she sobbed. "We love you. We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me, Sarah," I said, unmoved, "is to live in my own home, on my own terms." The tears dried up instantly, replaced by a familiar flash of anger. "You're being cruel," she hissed. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I corrected her. "I am simply refusing to be the glue that holds a broken thing together." The final confrontation came a week before they were due to move out. Michael found me in the garden, where I was planting new bulbs for the spring. He looked tired, defeated. "Mom, please," he said, his voice raw. "Don't do this. We have nowhere to go." "You've had nearly 3 months to find somewhere, Michael," I said, not unkindly. "That's not my fault." "It's the market," he said, gesturing vaguely. "Everything's so expensive. We can't afford anything on my salary alone." "Perhaps Sarah could get a job that pays more than her shopping habit," I suggested mildly. He flinched. "This isn't about money. It's about family." "Oh, I think it has always been about money," I said, standing up and dusting the dirt from my knees. "You just dressed it up in the language of concern." You saw this house not as my home, but as your inheritance. You saw me not as your mother, but as the obstacle standing in your way. The truth of it hung in the air between us, stark and undeniable. He had no defense against it because he knew it was true. I never wanted this, he said finally, his shoulder slumping. I never wanted to be this person. Neither did I, Michael, I said softly. But we make our choices. And then we live with them. The day they moved out was gray and overcast, the weather a perfect reflection of the mood. They hired movers, a sullen, silent crew who hauled their belongings out of my house with a grim efficiency. I stayed in my room, the door closed, listening to the sounds of my life being emptied of their presence. Chloe was there, a silent sentinel in the living room, ensuring nothing of mine was accidentally packed. When the last box was loaded, Sarah got in her car without a word, her face a mask of cold fury. Michael hesitated on the porch. He looked at the front door, at the house he had grown up in, at the life he was now leaving behind. He didn't look at me. Then he, too, was gone. The silence they left behind was vast, profound. It was not an empty silence. It was a clean slate. Chloe came to my door. They're gone, Grandma. I opened the door and she hugged me, a long, tight embrace. Are you okay? She whispered. I nodded, a real smile touching my lips for the first time that day. I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm home. The first thing I did after they left was open all the windows. I let the cool, clean November air sweep through the house, clearing out the stale energy of resentment and unhappiness. The house sighed, a sound of relief I felt deep in my own chest. It was mine again. Every room, every corner, every dust mote dancing in the afternoon light. It was all mine. Chloe stayed for dinner. We ordered pizza, the same kind she had brought over that first night, and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of furniture that was no longer there. We laughed. We talked about her future, about the art school she wanted to apply to in the spring. I told her about the trust I had set up for her, and she cried, not for the money, but for the faith it represented. You don't have to do that, Grandma, she said, wiping her eyes. I know, I said. That's why I did it. The days that followed were a quiet revelation. I discovered the simple joy of waking up in a silent house, of making a single cup of coffee, of reading the newspaper without interruption. I moved the furniture back to where Arthur and I had always liked it. I bought a new, comfortable armchair for the living room, just for me. I filled the house with flowers and music, the kind of classical music Michael had always called depressing. The house began to feel less like a fortress and more like a sanctuary. I didn't hear from Michael or Sarah for 2 weeks. Then a letter arrived. It was from Michael, his handwriting messy and rushed. It was not an apology, not really. It was a long, rambling account of his struggles, his financial pressures, his feeling of being a failure. It was filled with self-pity, but underneath it, for the first time, there was a flicker of self-awareness. I know I messed up, Mom, he wrote. I took you for granted. I saw the house as a solution to my problems, and I forgot it was your home. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I read the letter, then folded it and put it in a drawer. It wasn't a key to reconciliation, but it was, perhaps, a crack in the door. Forgiveness was a landscape I wasn't ready to explore yet. For now, peace was enough. I reconnected with my old friends. I rejoined my garden club. I started volunteering at the library, surrounded by the comforting smell of old books and quiet purpose. My life became small again, but in a way that felt expansive. It was a life curated by me, for me. One afternoon, a few months later, I was in the garden, tending to the new bulbs that were just beginning to push through the cold earth. A car pulled up, one I didn't recognize. Chloe got out of the passenger side. Michael was driving. He didn't get out, just sat behind the wheel, watching. Chloe walked up the path, a small, tentative smile on her face. "Hi, Grandma," she said. "Dad he wanted me to give you this." She handed me a small potted orchid, a vibrant green with a single defiant bloom. It was identical to the one I had bought for myself the day I had first visited the lawyer. My breath caught. It was a message, a quiet acknowledgement of the moment my rebellion had begun. "He said he saw it in a shop window and thought of you," Chloe said softly. I took the orchid, its delicate petals cool beneath my fingers. I looked from the plant to the car, where Michael was still waiting, his face unreadable behind the glass. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't demanding entry. He was just there, acknowledging the distance, acknowledging the reason for it. I nodded slowly. Tell him thank you," I said. Chloe smiled, a real, radiant smile. "I will." She hugged me, then ran back to the car. As they drove away, I stood in my garden holding the orchid. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if our fractured family could ever be truly mended. But as I looked at the small, resilient flower in my hands, I knew that I had done the right thing. I had reclaimed my home, my life, myself. And in the quiet, sun-drenched peace of my own garden, I felt a sense of belonging that no one could ever take from me again. If you're reading this, if you have ever felt invisible in your own home, a quiet fixture in someone else's life, know this: your silence does not equal consent. Your generosity is not an entitlement. Your home is not an inheritance to be waited for. It is yours. Claim it. Open the windows. Buy yourself a flower. And if they call you cruel for wanting to live in your own life, know that what they really mean is that they are no longer in control. And that, my dear, is not cruelty. It is freedom.